What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Sorry we're late to our own party. Sometimes it happens, trying to work through some tech issues and get our friend Andrew on it. It didn't work out today, but that's okay. We'll have him back another time. Sometimes technology gives you a nut punch, and so you just got to roll with it. You just got to take your licks and say, let's move on.
Which is why we're 10 minutes late, because we were curled up on the floor in a fetal position after getting punched in the nut.
That's exactly why we were curled up on the floor in a fetal position.
Now we're feeling better. We're back to human beings again.
Back to our old selves. So, well, hey guys, glad you're here. Put your comments in the chat. So glad you guys are all here. Everybody's checking in from all over the world. Welcome, welcome. Greg Ellis, our newest member. If you want to be a premium subscriber like Greg, you can hop on to YouTube and click join now, and you can become one of the guys who supports us on YouTube. We always encourage guys to do that. And if you don't want to do that, just hit the like button. That's all we ask you to do. Hit that like button, see how many guys we can get to like the podcast so we can promote it on YouTube. So Scott, I know we were going to have a conversation with Andrew, but we're going to try to pinch hit and have that same conversation with just the two of us, talking about what turns you on, the evidence that sexual arousal can change. And so when we think about that, a lot of times when we do these arousal template dynamics and what turns you on, we go way back into someone's story. And a lot of those things are really cemented into the ancient long past formation of a guy's idea. But there are things that can happen later on in life as you experience sexual experiences, and as you have different arousal things that come up for you, as you have novel visualizations and touch and sexual interactions, things can shift. Things can begin to go a different way, and we just want to talk about some of the things that maybe can cause that, because we are growing, developing human beings, are we not?
We are growing, developing human beings, and if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time this year, you've heard us talk a lot about story. We had Adam Young on, who's written a great book on how your story makes basically you everything you are as a human being. And by story, we mean how your experiences with other human beings have really shaped you to end up to be the person that you are. And of course, one of the major premises of that idea of story shaping you is the fact that nobody has a greater impact on your story than your mother and your father. Said another way, though, story is just another way of explaining how the neurons in your brain linked up and formed neural networks that create memories and that create the ability to regulate your emotions, the ability to have attachment with other people, and the ability to see yourself as a worthy of love and worthy human being or not. And so nothing has a greater impact on how your brain works in that regard than your experiences with other people. And the earlier those experiences are, the more profound they affect us. And that means that your mother and your father have the greatest impact on the development of your brain and how you do regulate your emotions and how you do attach to others or not, and how you do see yourself. And that includes your sexuality, right?
Yep, it does.
If you think about it, Chris, take something that you're sexually aroused by. For example, Are you aroused by older women or younger women or
younger women for sure. Younger women for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And that was,
again, back in the old days of my growing up and developing, I was looking for people that were my age and around my age who could engage with me and connect with me on an emotional and vulnerable level. And so that's what really made me come alive. And that arousal dynamic has kind of stayed put. But there's other things that have shifted over the last 30 years of my sexual development that are totally different. There have been dynamics where I was into, well, I'll just say this. I don't know why this is kind of come into the forefront. But the step parent, the step family dynamic was a really big thing for me later in my addiction. And obviously, it kind of became a fad there for a while, right? And so
Yeah.
I don't know where
Yeah.
that came from. Yeah. I mean, I'm not
Well,
attracted to any of my parents.
that's still a
So
big deal for a lot of guys, right?
yeah, it sure is.
Was it the stepmom or the stepsister type genre?
Stepsister deal was one. I'll be honest, the stepdad one, I guess, because I was older and they would be younger at the time, so that would be kind of a thing. That's kind of a taboo thing. I mean, that's crazy to think about that. I'm confessing
This
that live on
stepdad,
We Got Paul. Stepdad,
stepdad.
stepdaughter kind of deal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, then have you ever? So we're sitting here kind of being curious about this together, but have you
Yes,
ever
we are.
wondered about where that was coming from in your? Because it's not random, right? You're very
No.
clear about. Oh, that was arousing to me at a particular point in time, right?
I have
So,
wondered. I have done some work there. I think a lot of it was connecting with youth, and that seems predatory when I say that out loud, because I'm never acted on that. I've got two late teens, early 20s daughters, and all their friends are over here, and we have great relationships, and there's never anything that untoward. But in fantasy life, 7 or 8 years ago, when they were still kids at the time, that thing kind of popped up, and I was like, wow. And a lot of it was because I was on tube sites surfing the internet, and that was kind of the ubiquitous thing that was being promoted. So part of it was novelty, maybe. Part of it was that was something that I had not ever thought of before, and wow, let me
well,
try this out. And
it's
part of
definitely
it's that youth
taboo.
dynamic.
It's
Oh yeah,
taboo, right?
totally
It's
taboo.
it's kind of in the incest light category.
Yep.
Um,
Oh, it's
so
incest.
there's
It's not incest light. It's incest, in my opinion.
okay, so there's so there's so okay, let's just name it that.
Yep.
Um, so why does a person get aroused by the imagination of people that are related to each other having sex together?
Could it be for a longing for a twisted, closer family dynamic?
I think I think that's spot on, right?
I think it is.
I
I
think,
think it
and
is.
that's the point we're inviting everybody to is, you know, there's nothing to actually be ashamed about what arouses you. I think the first step that we would invite everybody to is to be able to have relationships with other men where you can actually be open and
Mhm.
transparent about what is arousing to you. Like for
Yep.
me, my arousal structure right now is more directed towards 20 to 40-year-old guys in that particular age range. And they have to
Mhm.
have specific features. They have to be, have hairy chests, kind of be hairy. Um, they have to, dark hair is more attractive
Mhm.
to me than blonde or redhead or whatever. And they have to be also kind of, um, what is the word I'm looking for? Like they have to be in a mentee mentor, like they have to be looking for a mentor, right?
Yeah.
They want to be, they want to have an older guy in their life who can show them how to do life as a man.
Mm.
So where do you think that comes from?
I don't know, Scott. Maybe that's a reversal of what you were looking for when you were younger. Maybe a little bit.
I think that might be right.
Look at us and all
That's
of our scientific knowledge diagnosing these things
Yeah.
off the cuff.
Well, I mean, look, there's no the rules for this diagnosis of where's that coming from actually come from us because we have to
Yeah.
know our stories. So
Yes.
there's not like a guidebook you can look in for, the old interpreting dreams thing, the interpreting fantasies. Now there's some
Yeah.
general principles.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
guys, if you want a good book on the subject, Jay Stringer's Unwanted is a fabulous book on the subject because he actually did research around this.
But he doesn't get into the specifics around what particular things connect to your story in your arousal dynamic.
Well, kind of. I mean,
No,
so
it doesn't get
Jay
this.
did.
It's general, very general, very general.
Okay, so for example, Jay found out that if you grow up with a family dynamic of very rigid, father figures, that that is one of the elements that leads you to have kind of power over fantasies. So
Sure.
your fantasies tend to be in that range of wanting to have power over others. Well, okay, why would that be? Well, because if I'm always under my dad's thumbs, then what I fantasize about is the opposite of that experience. And so I take it to my sexual life and fantasize about ways that I can have power over other people in the sexual dimension because I felt overpowered by my dad, right?
Yep.
And so that there is a correlation between your current sexual arousal elements, the templates or the models that, kind of the inner model that makes you aroused by things that goes back to your family system. And that's what we're saying is all these things are coming from places in our life where we're looking for, sorry, my phone is ringing and it's supposed to be off. So
So time out
that,
real quick,
that,
and we're going to dive back into some of the other pieces. For some of you guys, you've heard me talk about a super chat. Our RMC, really faithful listener, those in a super chat says, "Keep up the good work. I encourage everyone to invest in themselves, attend a retreat or a weekly group." Thank you for the promotion, RMC. You too, if you want to support the channel and you don't want to become a member, you can do super chats, and there's a little button down there at the bottom of the screen there where you can go in there and click and be a financial supporter of this. So we appreciate that when you guys are doing your super chats. But Scott, the thing we want to tease is talking about what's the evidence that these dynamics can change over time. And so you turn that phone off because it's going to keep ringing as it always does.
so I've updated my software and I've tried to do this several times and it does not work. So,
okay. Old man problems.
Oh, the joys of live podcasting.
Yes.
Okay. There is evidence that your arousal structures can change. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have Andrew on, because Andrew was kind of tangentially involved in some of the folks he works with in research that was recently done at UCLA in the last year that showed that a couple of different therapeutic modalities actually worked very well in reducing people's erotic attractions to certain kinds of fantasies or behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done in conjunction with UCLA. And so it's pretty valid research, well sourced. And of course, we see that all the time in the work that we do. Now, we use what's called narrative focused trauma care or narrative therapy story work in how we help guys experience change, because that is one of the proven modalities for helping people heal from complex trauma. So again, you have to understand our theory of treatment, where we're going as kind of the kind of care that we offer, is coming from a standpoint of viewing all of our unwanted behaviors, whether they're sexual or perfectionism or procrastination or being a people pleaser or overeating or over drinking or overworking or any of these things that end up providing some sense of pleasure or numbing or relief that we can't really stop on our own. They become really compulsive and they kind of take over our lives and they begin to intrude in our relationships and they begin to reinforce bad self-views of ourselves, that we're bad, worthless people and so on, that all those are coming from complex trauma. And we know complex trauma can be healed.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. So what the therapeutic modalities that we're using, particularly the narrative therapy or the story work, allows a person to do is go back into the moments where they've received a lot of harm in their life. Maybe they've had very shameful sexual experiences. Maybe they've had very painful relational disruptions with their mom or their dad or others. And they're allowed to go back into those and kind of get a different perspective by being with others and having that story shared together. They also experience the emotions that they experienced in that traumatic event, because one of the effects of trauma is we don't place those events in the past in a narrative. We tend to feel them in our bodies in the present. And so we're offering attunement and affect regulation as a part of that recipe that goes to help our nervous system heal, so that things in the past aren't intruding and influencing our present lives. And we know that works. It's been documented for 30 years that you can heal complex trauma, that you can heal attachment wounds, that you can heal the effects of sexual abuse and sexual experiences where you feel a lot of shame. So we're looking for other evidences, that show that you can actually engage some of these therapeutic modalities, and they do actually work to create neuroplastic change, which is neuroplasticity is really describing new learning, new change. So anyway.
Very true. Very, very true.
Andrew's actually asking, is there a way I can join straight from here? Yes, you're doing it, Andrew. But having a text conversation with you on this subject is not going to be nearly as exciting as having you on the podcast.
It's going to be hard.
So
glad you made it. Glad you made it here, though. So JP asked Scott and Steve. JP is still learning names. It's okay. It's Chris and Steve.
You can call me Steve. Everyone else calls me Scott.
Yeah, that's right. Be interesting to hear you talk about your relationship with your dads, assuming they're still alive. So yours is not still alive. So, or is he?
My dad's still alive.
I forget. I talked to so many guys.
Well, okay. So let's go back to my arousal structure. I am aroused or attracted to guys that are in that 20 to 40 year age range, and I figured out, well, that's a stand-in for my dad, right? Because my dad was 21 when I was born, and by the time I was done developing, I was 18, 19 years old. My dad's 41. So that's really about an unmet series of masculine needs that were not met by my dad. And then in puberty, I found a way to kind of escape the pain of that by sexualizing them and imagining sexual experiences with, by the way, dads. So the pornography I looked at as a teenager was supposedly showing dads and sons being naked together, like, laying on beaches and exotic locations, blah, 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 blah. But that was what was arousing to me as a teenager. And it seemed really perverted and twisted. But I wasn't interested in being sexual with my dad. But where was that longing coming from to have an older guy that would want to be sexual with me? Well, it's coming from my longing for a closer relationship with my dad that wasn't being met. And my fantasy was about reversing that and taking something that was creating a lot of emotional pain and a lot of relational disconnection in my life and imagining how to reverse that with pleasure, right? Mm-hmm. That's what fantasies do. We don't tend to fantasize about things that are actually good in our life. Right?
Yeah. Or really even things that are actually happening and I think part of this, Brad says my attraction template hasn't changed much. He's, hairy chest, natural manhood, brown eyes, kindness, tenderness, deep one-on-one conversations. So maybe if you don't really ever have an experience with that type of arousal dynamic, that longing remains. But the things that we do have experience with, maybe they kind of go, well, I'm looking for the next thing. I'm looking for the next thing. Well, what else is out there that can fulfill my desires? Because that's what a fantasy is it not? A longing for something I haven't obtained.
Yeah, and it's okay. So, Brad, you can comment on this if you feel welcome to do so or not. You don't have to answer the question, but was there a man in your life, like the fantasy that you have or your arousal structure, that gave you a lot of connection and kindness? And so it could be a positive I'm assuming that maybe that might be the case for Brad, but I'll let him speak on that if he wants to. But in my case, what I was seeking was a reversal of a really painful experience. But the same could be. It turns out that I had a sixth grade teacher named Mr. Croca, who was bearded and hairy, and he had a very kind face, and he was very loving and kind to me. And I tend to be drawn to guys like that too. Why? Because I'm wanting to go back and have that positive connection and experience that I had with him again as part of how I reverse the harm of not having that with my father growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be in psychology, they call this a transference, where I transfer something of some relationship in the past onto somebody right now. So if I was transferring onto you, Chris, any kind of longing that was unmet by my dad, it would be because there's something about you that reminds me of my dad. And we begin to reenact that in our therapeutic kind of friendship. Is when I'm interacting with you, my unconscious mind is really being driven by the fact that you remind me of my dad. And I'm trying to repair something in the relationship that I could never do with my dad. Now, this is fundamentally called attachment repair. And again, we know that insecure attachment can be repaired with something called earned secure attachment, which occurs in therapeutic relationships. It could be with a therapist or a coach, or it could be friends that actually meet those attachment needs that were never met by our parents.
Deep
and
mutual friendships. Yes.
Yeah. And as those wounds heal, then we become more secure in our own ability to build relationships with others. It also changes our view of ourselves. And it may spontaneously cause what I'm aroused by to change, because the fantasy no longer serves its purpose. If the fantasy is to help me repair an attachment wound, with a male father figure, and I start to have a lot of male friendships, maybe the power of that fantasy loses its pull on me because I'm getting my needs met, right? And that's what I've experienced.
Yeah,
so
I would agree.
And my experience has also been, when my needs are not being met, those erotic fantasies crop back up, and they're a signal to me that, hey, you're not getting your attachment needs met. Like, you need to get more connection now. So that's why we always say the opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of trauma is connection.
And speaking of connection, we've got 69 guys online right now. We're connecting with 69 guys.
Ding, ding, ding.
Brad says, absolutely, the major men in my story, 2 male teachers from high school, also wanting to be the opposite of my dad.
There you go.
So there was but I think there still is that longing that's there, because it's 2 male teachers. It's not people that you're going to be in a personal mutual relationship with. You don't have that longing fulfilled. One of my arousal dynamics kind of has gone away as I've been in a relationship with somebody that has that. I'll just tell her I married a woman with a big butt. I used to love looking at big butts all the time. Love big butts.
Like big butts, and I can't deny it.
Yeah. And so now that I'm in a relationship with one with a big butt and we're not struggling, I'm not longing for her, that fantasy has really gone away. I mean, I'll still like a big butt, but that's not going to be an arousal dynamic that's going to be like, I'm not turning around chasing people with big butts.
Yeah. And like, Brad, let me ask you another question, since I know you. You've come to retreats, and you're coming to the retreat, and I think you're getting a lot of connection there. It's platonic, it's not sexual, but I think that's meeting a need, isn't it? When you're getting those, because those 2 teachers really gave you what was missing in your life, and your body felt that deep, care and connection and belonging. And you need to have that in your life even now. So, to have a place where you can go. Now, you could go get that sexually by getting on a hookup app, or by going to a bar and, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think the sexual enactment always solves that problem. And here's why. Because if you're a sex addict, and this is not me, this is Gabor Mate saying this, so I'm ripping this off from him because I thought it was great.
All the best stuff gets ripped off.
if you really had a sexual addiction and you wanted to heal, all you need to do is go find another sex addict, and you could just have sex with them all the time.
But
But
Scott,
we know that doesn't
that's
work.
been proven it doesn't work because
Right.
you don't get your fantasy met. You just have more and more dopamine stimulation and want to act out more and more. It actually makes it worse.
That's right. And that's why, like, people that are hooking up and having lots of anonymous sexual encounters, it's clearly not healing the wound, and it becomes really compulsive because it's being driven by the next time I do this, I'll find the one, right?
Yeah, right.
There's this always the next one is the one. And we end up always looking for the one, and we never find the one because, frankly, you're not going to find the one in having anonymous hookup sex, because the one is somebody that you want a deep, meaningful relationship with. And you're not going to find that on an app, and you're not going to find that at a bar. You're going to find that in building a meaningful relationship.
Yep.
So before you take it to the sexual arena. So those are great examples of, look, we know this can change over time. We know your arousal structures and templates can be healed, and they can be done. This can be done in again, complex trauma is called complex trauma because it's complex. It's trauma that has many different rivers feeding into it. And I think healing modalities for complex trauma need to be complex as well. I don't think there's one silver bullet. So we don't just use narrative therapy. It's the focus of what we do, but we use other things like internal family systems. We use a lot of body or somatic stuff. Psychodrama, parts work. So there's a lot of other modalities that we try to draw from in kind of an integrated suite of tools that we can use. But the most important thing is relational connection. That's where the repair needs to occur, because we were all wounded in relationships. And so if you're going to repair these things, you have to have relationships, which is why if you go see a therapist and you don't have a relationship you don't feel like you're in a connected relationship with your therapist,
doesn't work.
Find somebody else.
Yes, quickly.
Right.
Quickly.
Yep.
Randy says, all the same for my childhood, no father influence, not to be a broken record, but for me, Superman fit all those check marks. Wow. I wonder why Superman was the guy who turned you on.
Yeah.
Because,
me too,
Dad was not
Randy.
Superman.
Well, okay. So Superman was part of my fantasy template too.
Yeah.
And it started when my grandma, who was one of the closest people in my life, gave me a bunch of comic books to read on the way back from a trip to Iowa back to Denver. And I had all this time. And so she turned me on to comic books when I was in 4th grade. And what I found in Superman was a kind and good and strong fantasy role model. Now, who wouldn't want a kind, good, strong model for masculinity in their life? I mean, that's what every boy wants.
That's great.
Right? Why do little boys put up posters of sports heroes or firemen or, police, whatever, army guys? Why do they play? Because they want to attach to a masculine ideal that helps them develop their masculinity. I want to be like that, Dad. I want to be like you. But if your dad's not a salient figure, which means that my dad doesn't present this image of somebody I really want to attach to very much, either because he's good and he's not strong, which means he's kind of passive. He lets my mom walk all over him. He doesn't present a strong masculine presence, or he's strong, but he's not good. He's not kind. And so he becomes a terrorist. And he throws his weight around. He throws temper tantrums. He pouts when he doesn't get his way. So one way or another, I don't see my dad as this figure that I want to bond to, but I sure did with Superman, because he was kind and good and strong. And then when the sex hormones kick in and, the wind outside becomes arousing, Superman can be arousing too, because those masculine needs weren't met. Yeah. And now I start to sexualize them and fantasize them. Randy agrees with me. Right on.
He's on. He's on.
I think you
And
can relate.
Warren says GI Joes for me. I wonder if you played with GI Joes when you were younger, Warren. That's a I wonder if that's what happened. So, um, the biggest piece I think, because of our title, is that what are the evidences that it can change over time? I mean, we've talked about I've fulfilled it. That fantasy's kind of been not living out as a fantasy anymore. But are there anything else that might lead us to change our arousal as time goes on?
Well, I mean, ultimately, if you can kind of understand what the fantasy or what the arousal structure is trying to help you with, which reveals kind of the path to healing. Like if I get those, if what I'm aroused by is fundamentally revealing deep unmet longings and needs in me, which is what I believe is happening there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I start to get those met in a non-sexual way, then my desire to meet them in a sexual way is naturally going to diminish to some degree. Now, does it go away entirely? Probably not, because if I started that fantasy arousal kind of model in my mind between 5 and 8, which is when most of these develop in our lives, by the way, if that is reinforced through masturbation and orgasm, right, it's bonding me to that thing, and it's creating these neural networks where arousal and that thing get associated together. So neurons that fire together wire together. So it creates this pathway that my arousal just naturally goes down. And the more I go down that, the greater the propensity I'm going to go there. So my brain is primed for arousal in that particular way. This is where fetishes develop. So how do I get to the point where I am sexually aroused by a let's say a toilet brush? Well,
Oh gosh.
maybe I'm talking about the handle, let's say.
I got what you're saying.
Not that I've ever been this way. However, well, maybe while I'm masturbating and kind of experimenting with masturbation as a teenager, I start to put that in my anus.
Yeah.
And as I do that, I'm experiencing pleasure by doing that. And so all of the neurons devoted to, the periogenital area, but particularly the anus and the prostate, start to get associated with that feeling of something being inside of me. And I'm masturbating and I have an orgasm, and there's the reward signal there. And so that becomes something that I start to get attached to as an object. So I literally now need to have an object that I insert into my anus to get sexually aroused and to experience orgasm by, because I've conditioned myself and my arousal structure around an object. So that's a fetish now.
Right.
So how do I change that? Well, first of all, I have to be honest with you, Chris, and other people about how did that form in my life?
Well, and that takes away the shame of it, because if you're talking about it, if you're not talking about it, then you're going to be like, so I really only get turned on by sticking something up my butt. And it just happened to be a toilet brush because it was there.
And the secrecy of that is bonding me to it through cortisol and oxytocin. And so it actually creates more stress for me to engage in that behavior, but have it be really secretive. And then because it's secretive, I feel shame about it. Right. So the first thing I have to do is safe relationships, where I can bring the shame of what arouses me into the context of the relationship, because the shame can only be minimized in the context of relationship. Shame is a social emotion. And Luke's saying TLC did a segment on a guy who was aroused by balloons. That's absolutely true. So that's a fetish too, but it's coming from some place in his very young developmental life where it somehow got associated with sexual arousal or sexual pleasure.
I don't think it always has to be young and developmental. I think it can come at any point, and there's a formative sexual arousal template, but then there's the developing one that we've talked about.
Also
because
true.
You don't learn the toilet brush arousal until you're experimenting with masturbation, which is in your teenage years or later.
Yeah, but your brain is still forming as a teenager. But to your point, there are a lot of guys who have never used transsexual porn who find it on Pornhub, and then
Totally.
they start to get aroused by chicks with a dick because they have masturbated to transsexual porn so often that their arousal structure starts to get acclimated to that as a form of arousal. And that's happening way past 25 when the brain
Totally.
has kind of slowed down. Because why? Because neuroplasticity occurs throughout our life. So neuroplasticity is just new learning, and novelty is one of those things that drives new learning. Sexual intensity or emotional intensity drives new learning. Well, when you're masturbating to transsexual porn and you're 30 years old, you're still leveraging the novelty of it. It's taboo. It's got all these novelty elements. So it's highly emotional. It's creating a supernormal stimulus. And those supernormal stimuluses are easy to attach to.
Yep.
So this is like a form of sexual imprinting, right? So, but again,
And some would even say that sexual experience could change this as well, because you could go out and have a sexual experience with someone, with another person, and that would become an arousal dynamic because you enjoyed it so much that you're like, I want to repeat this. I want to repeat this.
I know guys who were not attracted to dudes until they had a sexual experience in their 30s or 40s. And all of a sudden, boom, now that becomes a thing. So you've got to, the first place to start with this is, if I'm going to change my arousal structure, I have to have relationships to help me do that. I can't do that on my own because of the shame around it. And I need to be in an environment where I can reduce the degree of shame in my life around that. Second thing is engaging your emotions and gaining some emotional stability and the ability to name and feel emotions in your body. Because in the most cases, all of these sexually compulsive things that we end up going to are driven out of a desire for emotional regulation. Now, we don't realize it, but like you talked about in the podcast last week, why am I always horny? Well, you're always horny because you're not feeling angry.
Yeah.
Or you're not feeling sad. And you learned as a boy to associate horniness as a way of escaping the sadness. And so every time you feel sad now, you dissociate from sadness, but go right to horniness. And you've reconditioned yourself and wired yourself to be sexually aroused unconsciously when you're sad. And again, so you're going to have to unwind that behavioral pattern by abstaining from that for a while, which is going to be painful. And by working on forming,
Scott, because I really like that regulation. It's a really well-worn path of self-regulation to go down that dynamic to say, hey, I want to feel good. I don't want to feel bad. And so this works for me. And yet I have a lot of shame about it. So trying to get guys to stop it is really hard.
Yeah. And you have to work on both abstaining from using sexual arousal and orgasm as a regulation vehicle while you're reaching out to other people to get regulated and starting to learn to feel your emotions again.
Both are very scary things. Both are very scary things.
Yeah, well, because you're asking me to give up my blank. Like, I've become very secure with this way of masturbating or this way of getting aroused, and I'm afraid to give it up because what happens if I don't get an erection when I go to have sex with my wife now, right?
Yep.
And there are legitimate fears that guys have about this, but there is no way to stop using that compulsive behavior or that object or that whatever if you don't face those fears and go get your emotions regulated by a human being. Because orgasm is great, but it was not created to regulate emotional states.
Very true. Very true.
And so you get in connection, and then you start engaging your story to figure out, when did I start turning to this? Like, why? What wound is this trying to help me heal? And how do I really heal the wound instead of trying to continue with using your somewhat addictive behavior to feel better when you're not feeling good?
Oh, Scott, we got to wrap it up. What's the last thing you want to say for the guys? We got to give it a hard out.
Wow.
Sorry to give that to you, but that's where we are.
I can't believe this conversation went this quickly. Oh, we did start late though, didn't we?
We started a little late, but yeah.
So I would say, guys, if you've got a sexual desire or a behavior in your life that is causing you some personal problems, right? It's either
Emotional
making you
distress, shame, all these different things.
emotional distress, it's making you feel shame, or it's kind of intruding in your relationship with your partner or finding a partner, and you want to have a partner, and it's damaging your view of yourself. Like you feel really bad about yourself after you do it. Our invitation would be to get some help for that. Like, you can change. It is possible to grow your neurons and have them link up in new ways, but you're going to need some help doing that. You can't change on your own, which is why we have groups, why Chris and I coach, why we have weekend retreats where you can start to engage some of these things, and maybe not just sexual, but that are causing problems in your life, and they're not serving you well anymore. Maybe they started as a boy, maybe they started in adolescence, maybe they started 5 years ago, but you find yourself kind of attached to them and you can't give them up. The key is more attachment with human beings, not continuing on with the object or whatever it is that you're doing sexually. So
connect. And you can do that at wegotballspod.com. We've got 2 retreats coming up, a little availability there. Join us for that, end of October and beginning of December, and an intensive starting in the first of the year with a brand new location. We'll be letting you know those dates very soon. So, Scott, good to see you. Sorry we didn't get Andrew on. Sorry, Andrew. We'll have you back, but it's always good to be with you guys and to connect around these very interesting, vulnerable topics right here on We Got Balls.
And you do too. Have a good weekend.
Take care.